Hello again, class. So this is another video about chapter 13, so writing the multi-paragraph essay. So in particular, I want to talk a little more about introductions. So if you want to open your book and take a look at and what we're going to be doing, we'll work up to um, doing that activity 13-2, which is going to be some practice writing some introductions. So if you want to take a look on page 163 and 164, I have a list of some common methods of introduction. Now remember that the purpose of an introduction is to grab the reader's attention. We want to get them excited about the topic, and we want to make it, we want to get them thinking about it. We want to get them interested so they want to continue reading. Now, I'm going to be really honest with you. An introduction paragraph is probably the most challenging kind of paragraph you're ever going to have to write. One thing you may notice looking at the introduction paragraph in that corner store essay that's on pages 156 to 158. One thing you might notice looking at that is that the introduction does not actually get into what the essay is about. You also maybe are going to notice that unlike all the paragraphs we've been working on all semester, this paragraph does not have a topic sentence. It does not stay on topic. Most of the rules we've been talking about kind of go out the window for an introduction. So it is a very different type of paragraph that I'm asking you to kind of learn how to write. That said, it is a really important type of paragraph to write. Every single longer essay or longer paper you're writing is going to have an introduction. So understanding how to do this is going to be very, very important going forward, doing the final work for this class, and then in particular as you go on into 101. So now introductions can be really tricky because while you're wanting to get your reader's interest, you have to be very careful to not give away any of the good stuff that belongs in the body paragraphs. So those are basically those 3 or maybe 4 paragraphs that you have between your introduction paragraph and then your conclusion paragraph at the end. So those are the body paragraphs. So you don't want to get into that. You want to save your good stuff for later. So you want to get readers thinking about your topic. You could even think about it as getting your readers to, you want to guide them towards your topic, or maybe kind of guide them around your topic. And I'll explain some different methods you might try. So I'm looking at page 163 and 164, and some common methods of introduction. So the first one is to introduce your topic on a broad or general note. So this is a little bit of what the corner store author is doing by talking about good jobs in general. What the author's doing there is getting readers thinking about good jobs they've had, and this leads nicely into the thesis statement that then goes on to tell the readers the specific good job that's the topic of this essay. So that's one way you could go about it. By the way, I should add there's not any single correct way to write an introduction. And in fact, I generally encourage folks to try maybe even writing out a couple and decide what you like best. So having a couple different drafts is probably a good idea. And you might even consider doing some pre-writing for your introduction to just give you ideas and decide which, how you want to go about it. So another method you can use is to introduce your topic using contrasting ideas. So start with an idea or a situation that is the opposite of the one that you're going to be discussing in the essay. This method can pique your reader's interest by surprising them. So we see the corner store author do this a little bit in combination with this opening on a kind of broader general note by mentioning drawbacks to the good jobs that were mentioned. So, readers might be thinking about how unpleasant features like little money or miserable hours or coworkers with negative attitudes can make even a nice job not so great. This makes readers want to keep reading to hear about a job that has all the positive features of the good jobs mentioned, but none of the drawbacks. So opening with a contrasting idea can be a nice way to introduce. The author could have also used this method by maybe discussing bad jobs in the introduction, leading up to a thesis statement such as, after all these horrible experiences, I finally found a great job at the corner store where the work is easy, the people are wonderful, and the pay and benefits are awesome. So that might have been another angle that author could have taken. Another way you might go about writing an introduction is using what is called an anecdote. So basically, this is a short story to introduce your topic. So human beings are natural storytellers, and a brief story that relates to your central idea is a great way to draw in reader interest. Another way to think about this is telling the story of why you're writing about this topic. This is particularly a useful method in longer research papers. So, for example, if you were writing a paper about some aspect of the battle at Gettysburg, which was a major turning point in the Civil War that took place in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, you might introduce the topic by discussing your experience visiting the Battlefield National Park, looking at some key features that made you want to know more. Um, I'll be honest, this is a particular favorite method of mine. Honestly, in almost all of the major papers I've written and things that I've published, I almost always open with an anecdote. And I basically tell readers why the topic is important to me. So, for example, I wrote a paper some years back about the importance of professional development and better training for adjunct and part-time faculty. And I opened by talking about my experiences when I was an adjunct, a part-time faculty member. And I wrote about how difficult it was and how I didn't have any opportunities to go to workshops or get training. And I just kind of had to wing it, and everything was trial and error. And so I opened with that story to grab my reader's interest and to demonstrate that, hey, this is an important topic because look how hard this was for me. And gosh, if we did a better job with this, then maybe it'd be easier for folks. So this might not work as well with some of the essays you're writing in this class, but it's definitely a nice method to think about. Another way that you might open an essay, write an introduction, is to introduce your topic with a startling statement or a statistic. This is really kind of another way of demonstrating the importance or maybe urgency of your topic. So, for example, if you were writing about suicide and self-harm among young transgender people, you might focus your introduction on presenting some of the statistics, such as the fact that according to the survey conducted by the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, 41% of trans people have attempted suicide. Readers will find that information alarming and upsetting, and that's going to get them interested in wanting to continue reading. Excuse me, so that they can understand how that number could be so high and what can and is being done to maybe solve this problem. In addition, you might let the approach to your essay shape how you go about your introduction. So, for example, if your essay is looking at a process, that is, and we didn't actually end up writing a process essay. But if you were had written an essay about how to do or make something, you might consider discussing the finished product in your introduction. So, for example, if you were explaining the steps involved to make chocolate chip cookies, you might introduce your paper with a description of how you like to eat them using concrete language about the way they look, taste, and smell. So I might write about how one of my favorite things to do is bake a batch of chocolate chip cookies, and I just love to have friends over and then watch movies and enjoy these cookies, and I might describe what they taste like. If I can get my readers' mouths watering, they're going to want to read more because they're going to read that and say, wow, those cookies sound amazing. Gosh, how'd you make those? And then that'll lead right into those steps I took. Another way you could think about introducing an essay that's talking about a process is to talk about what happens if you don't do the process or if you don't do it correctly. So, for example, and this was actually an essay a student handed in some years ago, this student wrote about how to prepare for a motocross race. But he opened the essay with an introduction about a time when the steps weren't properly followed. And he kind of took shortcuts and ultimately got very badly hurt. So that got readers wondering about, well, hey, how could that kind of an accident be avoided? And so they wanted to kind of read more. Now, if if you're writing about an essay, or if you're writing an essay that's looking at the causes or the effects that led up to or resulted from an event in your life. Um, and this is an essay that we did do, the cause or effect essay. You might use your introduction as a space to elaborate on the central event. So, for example, I know the one we talked about in class was about writing about maybe how a car accident affected you. So you might use the introduction as a space to discuss what actually happened that day. So you could talk about how scary it was, how your body tensed up, the sound of the squealing brakes, the crunching metal. Readers are going to want to read more because they're going to be thinking, gosh, how awful. And they're going to want to know, you know, how ultimately this affected you. Likewise, if you're writing about, say, the causes that led to your team winning the big game, you might use your introduction to describe that big game and how it felt when you won. Readers, again, are going to want to read because they'll want to know, hey, wow, that win sounded amazing. And they're going to want to read, well, hey, what led up to it? What did you do to make that happen? If your essay is exploring the connotative definition of a word, you might use the introduction as a space to elaborate on the denotation. So that's that dictionary definition or commonly held definition. Now, obviously, the body of the essay is going to focus on those connotations, so those personal meanings. But your introduction would be a great place to connect with readers on how most people define the word. So this is a little similar to opening on a broad or a general note, where you're going to speak more generally about the word and how people tend to see it or use it. You might even consider briefly discussing what's called the etymology of your word. And etymology simply means the history of the word. So where did it come from? What's its maybe Greek or Latin root? That kind of thing. And maybe how the word's changed or how different people think about it. No matter how you go about your introduction, keep in mind this is where you're making the first impression on your readers. So please plan to spend extra time working on it. And like I was saying, definitely consider doing some pre-writing or maybe even trying a few different drafts to just see what you like best or what's going to set up the rest of your writing. So I'm going to stop this video and make a separate one that's actually more specific to the activity. So these are taking a very long time to upload, and I think smaller videos might work a little bit better. So I'll stop this video for right now, and then I'll resume and do another one that's going to really continue talking about these introductions.